Monday, July 29, PFT PM, recorded in the AM. Now that the Olympics are in full swing, we're trying to get these done earlier. It'll debut by the PM. You'll see it in the PM. I'm going to be recording it in the AM. Not that it really matters to you. One of the realities, though, is there will be news throughout the course of the day that we won't cover here because we are taping it early. But hell, we do PFT live at 7 a.m. every day. So at some point, you got to just do it and accept the fact that there may be developments that you need to address the next day. Before we get started, I'm feeling a little self-conscious because, I know I wear this shirt at least once a week. I'll peel back the curtain. I got a lot more polo shirts than this, but here's the problem. Because I kind of push it right up until the last minute, most of my other polo shirts need to be ironed or steamed, and I don't account for that in the whole, oh crap, I got to get in the shower and attach my toupee and shave and get down to the wine cellar and turn on the lights and be in, somewhat semblance of on time so we can get this thing started. So for tomorrow, I plan tonight to find a polo shirt I've never worn in this space before and get it ironed and have it ready, laying out your clothes for the first day of school. That's my vow for tomorrow. We'll see if I can honor that. All right, let's get to it. Now, some stuff happened on Friday after we posted PFT PM, after we recorded it. Not sure when it posted, and it relates to a couple of the hot spots for quarterbacks. The two hold-ins. The first time we'd ever seen any quarterback hold-in, we had two of them. And I'm going to start with Tua, the guy that I wasn't sure the Dolphins were going to pay. I'm not sure the Dolphins were sure they were going to pay him. At the end of the day, $53.1 million per year in new money APY. And one of the things that I am committed to doing is getting the media to recognize that APY isn't the gospel. It isn't the end-all, be-all. It isn't the definitive metric for determining contract value. New money APY relates to the average value of the new years added to the existing contract. And I have said this time and again, and I will keep saying it because it is the 100% God's honest truth. There is no such thing as an extension for these contracts. They rip it up and they replace it with a new deal. I've seen them. They don't staple the new years onto the back end. The old contract is gone, and whatever money the player was due to make under the old contract is subsumed into the new one. So for Tua, a 4-year extension of his existing 1-year deal, 5-year contract. And the way it's structured, the Dolphins are on the hook for the next 3 seasons. They made a firm 3-year commitment. That was one of the points we were exploring last week. Where on the continuum of Deshaun Watson with the 5 years fully guaranteed and the Derek Carr extension with the Raiders that had a 1-year escape hatch? I'm trying to get that term to catch on with the media. And an agent repeated it back to me over the weekend, just kind of organically, escape hatch. It's like, ooh, good. Because that's one of the key factors. There are many key factors. APY is misleading. APY is incomplete. Here's why APY ends up being the thing that you only hear about from most in the media. Because the army of thumb warriors trying to beat each other to Twitter with the news that so-and-so signed a new contract, even though we're all going to find out about it minutes after the initial tweets, they go with APY because that's what the agents want them to do. And the agents are the ones who are giving them the information. So if we go with APY and we ignore everything else, we get ourselves near the front of the line so we can get the text message and we can win the race to Twitter, and everyone will say, oh, the ultimate insider. They beat everyone else on the news that was going to come out 5 minutes later anyway, and they positioned to do that. They positioned themselves to do that by just carving off a little sliver of their soul and buying into this APY nonsense when it's just part of the story. But still, it's a lot of money for Tua. And when you look at the total value of the contract, it's $47.1 million over 5 years. New money average, $53.1 million. So, I said all along, Dolphins are going to want the contract to start with a 4 Tua's going to want it to start with a 5, and they both kind of got what they wanted because the Dolphins kept the total commitment on average from signing to $47.1 million, new money average $53.1 million, and there's a lot of money in there for Tua that he'll make over the next 3 years. What will happen after 3 years? The Dolphins can get out of it, and they would only have left $3 million fully guaranteed for 2027, which would be year 4 of the contract. $3 million fully guaranteed, subject to offset. So they could cut him after 3 years, and they could move on. They could also trade him too. I'd have to look at the cap hits to see when a trade would be a practicality. But look at what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson. You may reach a point as a team where you just say, we got to get somebody else at this position and trade the contract or cut the contract up and take the cap hit. So the Broncos didn't trade him. They cut him and they took a massive cap hit, the bulk of it this year, but still plenty of it next year. You could trade a guy too. You can get out of a contract in different ways. Those are just factors that go into evaluating the full and entire deal. The bottom line is Tua got paid. His cash flow this year is over $43 million. And then you've got Tyreek Hill, who's still waiting. And we reported over the weekend that now the Dolphins have signed Tua. They're going to pivot to Tyreek. Tyreek is south of $20 million. I wrote something yesterday at PFT that addresses the challenges of paying Tyreek, of getting him maybe to the $35 million APY new money that Justin Jefferson got. I don't think they're going to get there. I think Tyreek has to realign his priorities as to what he wants. Maybe he needs to be thinking more in terms of cash flow or other factors and not new money APY. They were stuck on $30 million when he got traded by the Chiefs to the Dolphins, and he has a contract that has a fugazi final year that gets him from 25 to 30. And he himself says 30. See, that becomes the point of pride. That's the measuring stick in the locker room and in the league at large. Your APY is basically tattooed on your forehead, and that's how you rank yourself among others. They don't care about, for the most part, tax rates. They don't care about cash flow. They want that APY because the higher the APY, the more valuable you're perceived as being among your peers and your competitors. Tyreek needs to set that aside because, again, APY is just part of the story. And for Tyreek, it may just be a simple reality of taking money from 2026 when he's due to make $45 million and pushing it into 2024 where he is south of $20 million. Regardless, now that Tua is done, they'll pivot to Tyreek and see if they can take better financial care of the guy who is still more important to the team than the quarterback. That's the great disconnect with so much of this. And it reminds me of 6 years ago when the Falcons all of a sudden had issues with Julio Jones. I think it was as simple as Jones saying, after Matt Ryan got his latest contract at the time, which paid $30 million a year, which at the time was the highest paid at the position. Look at how much it's changed in only 6 years. Julio was at $15 million a year. Ryan was at $30 million a year. And I firmly believe Julio looked at the situation and thought, what's wrong with this picture? There's no way Matt Ryan is twice as valuable as I am. And that's where this whole, the market is the market, as Tua said, goes into the quarterback analysis, and teams just buy into that. They buy into that. And they don't really push back on the idea that even though the market is the market, other players we have are more valuable to the team. And the quarterback contract needs to reflect it. I suspect the Dolphins tried every which way they could. At the end of the day, they decided to stick with the known commodity, to get this thing resolved, to make a 3-year commitment to Tua with the ability to continue it for 2 years beyond that. We'll see how it works out for the Dolphins. We'll see how it works out for Tua. And one interesting note about the Tua contract, it's got a fairly robust incentive package in it. And it's all tied to a combination of participating in at least 50% of the regular season snaps, but also winning playoff games. He doesn't get a penny without winning a playoff game. And so far in his career, he hasn't won a single playoff game. We'll see if they can break their streak. 24 years of not winning a playoff game this year with this commitment they've made to Tua. We'll see if it unlocks a higher level of performance from him as well. The other quarterback who got a big contract on Friday, even bigger from an APY standpoint, Jordan Love. Now, one reason that he got more in new money APY, he was starting with less by way of remaining money. Remember, we made that point last week. He's at 10.5 million. And there's a question about another 500,000. That's a workout bonus he's already earned. I'm not including that $500,000. He's already earned that money. That's gone. That's off the table. He was due to make 10.5 million this year. He gets the 4-year, $55 million new money, $220 million added on to it. It's a $230.5 million contract over 5 years. But it's a hell of a deal. It's a market value deal. I remember last week, some were saying he'll be the highest paid player in league history by the end of the week. He really wasn't. He's tied. He didn't get past Joe Burrow at 55 and Trevor Lawrence at 55. He matched them. He probably wanted to get more than that. Remember, APY, that's the thing for the agents and the players, because the agent wants to take that deal and use it to recruit. This is recruiting season coming for the next wave of players who are going to be entering the draft. What better way to lure new clients than to say, I just negotiated the richest contract in league history. So it's tied. It's a 3-way tie, 55, 55, and 55. Love matches Burrow and Lawrence. And the naysayers would say, what's Jordan Love done? Halfway through the season, the jury was out. During their bye week, Brian Gutekunst, the GM of the Packers, said, hey, these next games are critical to Jordan Love. If he wouldn't have turned it around, he wouldn't have gotten this deal. If he wouldn't have turned it around, the Packers would have explored their options at the quarterback position. Some would say, and some have said, that one of the reasons why he did turn it around is he had the security that he knew he was going to have a contract into 2024 that paid him not great money, but good enough. He could take some solace in that. He wasn't as anxious and desperate to prove himself. And he ultimately did. And by the end of the year, he was one of the best quarterbacks in football. The Packers firmly believe in him. The Packers made the massive commitment. It's another 3-year commitment. Now for them, we've got the full numbers at PFT. You can find them in the search box. For them, they would be stuck with $20 million fully guaranteed in 2027, subject to offset. Would somebody pay him $20 million if he regresses, if he bottoms out? I don't know. People kept paying Jimmy Garoppolo in the 20s, so maybe they would. But the Packers cement the contract and continue to cross their fingers that they're going to be the first team to ever pull off 3 straight franchise quarterback, the relay, the 3-by Hall of Fame relay. Can Jordan Love join Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers as Hall of Fame quarterbacks? No one's ever done that before. And it shows. You know, the Packers had about 20 years of being lost in the wilderness between Vince Lombardi and Brett Favre. And since then, it's been 30 years plus of contending, not necessarily at a high level, but contending. It is disappointing they've only won 2 Super Bowls. If you're a Packers fan and you look at what they've had, it's like, we probably should have had more. But 2 over the past 30 years is better than, 0, as plenty of teams have ended up with. So the Packers have Jordan Love, and this is where it gets very interesting. And this is let me set it up for the next topic, because this is where I'm going to get into the concept of cash flow. Because coincidentally, over the weekend, Patrick Mahomes, Chiefs quarterback, spoke with Jared Bell of USA Today about his own contract. And when we talk about quarterback value and APY, when Patrick Mahomes got to $35 million per year, he really pushed the bar. 45. It was at 35. Remember, I mentioned 6 years ago, the guy in first place with Matt Ryan at 30. It inched its way up to 35, and then boom, here comes Patrick Mahomes at $45 million per year in new money average. But to get there, he had to commit 12 years into the future. And I remember when I first looked at that deal, it's like, I don't know about this contract. And it had this whole idea. There was what was it? It was some new term, guarantee mechanism. It was something we've never heard before, that ensured he was going to get the money. And what's happened since then, as Patrick Mahomes falls farther and farther down the stack, when you consider all the guys making $50 million or more per year, new money APY. Again, and this is another reason why that's just one piece of the puzzle. You've got 3 guys at 55. You've got 2 at 53.1, Jared Goff at 53, Justin Herbert at 52.5, Lamar Jackson at 52, and Jalen Hurts at 51. That's the 50 million plus per year new money APY club. And then there's others, not many, but between 51 and 45, like Kyler Murray's in there. He may be the only one. I'd have to look it up. But all the way down at 45 is Patrick Mahomes. Now, why isn't he upset? Because, key factor, that the media traditionally has overlooked, but I'm trying to get more people to be sensitive to this. It takes a little bit of elbow grease to get there, but it's not all that difficult if you really want to do it. Here's why Mahomes isn't upset. Because from 23 to 26, that 4-year window, his cash flow higher than anyone else in the league. And even now that Tua has signed his deal, now that Jordan Love has his and all the other big deals in the 50s, cash flow from 24 through 27, number one, Mahomes at $215.6 million over the next 4 years. Joe Burrow, quarterback of the Bengals at $55 million, new money APY. He's at $213.9. Jared Goff, $193.6. Here's Tua at $186.1. And when you look at 4-year cash flow, and this is where it gets interesting too, because both Love and Tua are represented by the same firm. And Jordan Love's deal looks better when you look at new money APY by $1.9 million per year. But cash flow over the next 4 years, Tua is at $186.1 and Love is at $186. And you got to wonder who within Athletes First engineered that so Tua gets just a little more over the next 4 years than Jordan Love gets. And that's not an accident. 186, 186.1. That is not an accident. Somebody engineered this so Tua would come in just a little click above Jordan Love. One other point about Love and Tua that I didn't get to earlier, and I want to mention it now, even though I'm kind of going out of order, but it speaks to, I think, the Mahomes deal as well. How soon do you get back to market? That was the big criticism of the Mahomes deal. He signed up with the Chiefs for a 12-year extension, a 10-year extension. It's into the next decade. It was way too long. It's unprecedented how long he's under contract. The key is to get back to market quickly, to put the team in a position as soon as possible where they have to redo the deal. That's why Dak Prescott's contract was so damn effective. 4 years, $160 million. That's it. We're going to talk about him in a second. You've got Mahomes with that ultra-long-term commitment. For both Tua and Love, it's just a 4-year extension. The teams wanted to do at least 5. That creates a 6-year commitment. And what happens is, when you've got the same firm representing both players, you can play one team against the other. You can say to the Packers, hey, the Dolphins are going to give Tua a 4-year extension, so you better give Love a 4-year extension. You can say to the other team the exact same thing. And you get them both to do what you want them to do because you're coordinating the effort. And that's one of the things that the union has been trying to get agents to do unsuccessfully for years. The players are allowed to collude. The players are allowed to work together. The players are allowed to coordinate their strategy to try to get the best possible deal for both players if you've got multiple players who are negotiating contracts at the same time. It's easy to do it when they're with the same firm. It's harder to do it when they're with different firms, but it still should be done. And that's the great irony of this. The players are allowed to collude, and they rarely do. The owners aren't allowed to collude, and they kind of do. Probably more often than we realize, in order to hold everything down. The owners work together to hold everything down. The players should be working together to lift everything up. And Love and Tua, a great example of, because even though it's not shown in the dollars, the fact that they did 4-year extensions instead of 5, they'll both be in a position where they're due to become free agents before they turn 31. And that's a win for these guys. That means there'll be another long-term contract, and maybe, depending upon a variety of factors, including health and effectiveness at the top of the list, there may be 2 more. For most positions, you get 1. Tua and Jordan Love are set up to get multiple, potentially additional contracts. And every time you come back to the trough, there's more food in it for all players because the cap keeps going up and up and up. And that brings me to Dak Prescott because he's the next one. We did a post over the weekend, who's due to get paid next? And it dovetails with the concept from last month or earlier this month. It's all starting to kind of blur together as to who's going to be the first one to get to $60 million per year. Because no one got past 55, 55 is now the high watermark for a year. You've got 3 guys caught at the same number. Who's going to get to 60? Is it going to be Dak? Is it going to be somebody else? But Dak's up next to get paid. Now the question is, when are the Cowboys going to pay him? When are they going to say uncle or Mate, as they say in the Bear? It's funny. One of the reasons I love the Bear, they've got their own little world of speaking in terms, and you have to crack the code from the outside. The way they've been communicating among each other forever kind of bubbles up into the show. That is a hell of a digression. But we were watching the episode last night where Richie is saying to Fax, say Mate, which is basically saying uncle. And Jill's like, what the hell is Mate? It's like, well, I never heard that before, but it's kind of like probably their own little way of speaking. Anyway, I have no idea. I have no idea how I ended up down that path. So I'm going to try to pull myself back. Oh, they're trying to get the Cowboys to say Mate and pay Dak Prescott. And it really is fascinating to watch this play out because I wrote something about this earlier today. And look, hey, Jerry Jones has said it himself, and he said it while testifying at the Sunday Ticket trial. He just wants to be interesting. And he is definitely interesting. And as we said back in March, when the Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons contracts were keeping the Cowboys from going all in the usual poker sense. We're all in. Well, you can't even begin to go all in with free agents who might help your team get better if you can't get past square one with Dak, CeeDee, and Micah because, as I surmised at the time, when it comes to handling their great young talent and paying them accordingly, the Cowboys are cheap, short-sighted, and not as smart as they think they are. That's still lingering. Here we are, 6 months later, and none of those 3 guys have gotten new contracts. One of the big stories over the weekend, the Cowboys have made new proposals to CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. That was our biggest story from a traffic standpoint by far for the weekend because we're all waiting. When are they going to pay the players who need to be paid? When are they going to do it? What's the holdup? Everybody else is signing their players. CeeDee Lamb's held out. Dak Prescott, we know what he's worth. We know what his contract says. We know what the stakes are here. He can become a free agent next year, unfettered, unrestricted, no way to franchise tag him. What's going on? And it's just more foot drag and excuse making. I saw over the weekend, there was a little snippet that made its way onto a tweet from someone who works for the Cowboys website, which means he works for the Cowboys. It's not pejorative. It's a fact. His paycheck is signed by Jerry Jones. He was characterizing something Jerry Jones said about the Sunday Ticket verdict that made me think that, man, this whole thing about trying to make the players, pay for the verdict, they're going to start this now. They're going to start trying to claw back revenue from the salary cap formula now to create a fund to help finance the $14.1 billion they may eventually have to pay to resolve the Sunday Ticket case. And then I saw Clarence Hill's treatment of Jerry Jones' comments, more comprehensive, more details. And I looked at it and I said, this is just another thing that Jerry is using to justify being cheap, not knowing what the Sunday Ticket judgment outcome and impact will be on the salary cap. So we got to be careful. We don't know what's going to happen with the cap, so we got to be careful. Jerry Jones boasted about how good he is at looking around corners. Well, if he was that good at looking around corners, he would have seen the Sunday Ticket verdict coming, and he would have taken steps to avoid it or just settle the case. So Dak, CeeDee, Micah, they keep dragging their feet. They keep making excuses, and fundamentally, they are cheap. Fundamentally, they think that there is inherent value in wearing that silver helmet with the blue star on the side of it, and the players should do the team a favor. And this whole nonsense, and I know Sims and I have argued about it in the past, and I apologize while I multitask here. I got a text, and I got to make sure that it is not anything important, and it's not. But Sims and I have argued about this idea that, the players need to not be too greedy. They need to not take too much of the cap. And I reject all that. It's for the players to get as much money as they can while they can. They have very limited bites at the apple. They have very few opportunities to get paid. The owners are always getting paid. And this idea that you have to leave money behind, there has to be a competitive team, I think this is just part of the way that the owners manipulate the media and in turn the fans to get behind the laundry and not behind the players. Because I reject the idea that paying your best players top dollar keeps your team from being as good as it can be. Now, that's not to say that you should make bad decisions about who you're going to pay. It's one thing to pay Patrick Mahomes. It's another thing to commit 5 years, fully guaranteed, $46 million per year to Deshaun Watson. And 1 year he misses 11 games due to suspension. Another year he misses 11 games due to injury. And when he plays, he's not the guy that he used to be. That's a bad decision on how you allocate your resources. But the best players, and we all know who the best players are, they need to fight to get paid. And what the Cowboys are doing is trying to come up with any reason under the sun to not pay Dak as much as Dak deserves, to not pay CeeDee Lamb as much as he deserves, and to avoid paying Micah Parsons as long as possible. And what's going to happen is they're eventually going to say Matei. They're eventually going to pay more than they want to pay. Why not just be done with it now? Why do you sit around and wait for someone to say, fine, I'll just take whatever you're willing to give me? Because that strategy hasn't worked in the past. We'll see if it works moving forward. Sunday ticket. Big week for the Sunday ticket case. I continue to read the transcript. I'm getting there. Got about 700 pages left. I am getting there. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. 1,700 plus pages down, 700 pages to go. A lot of interesting stuff. I'm doing typically day-by-day updates, witness-by-witness updates, development-by-development updates at PFT. And look, it's funny. Some will say nobody cares about this. I see the traffic. There's a lot of people who care because two reasons. One, the case was horribly covered by all of us in the media. I regret not being there for the whole trial, although that would have meant a month in LA, which I continue to say, I'm far better off for not having spent a month in LA. But getting the whole transcript and having a chance to read it and digest it and understand it and break it down and see what was happening. I got a lot I could say about the Sunday ticket case, and I've said a lot already. Let's just say this for now. Big week coming, because on Wednesday, this is when the parties go back to court on the NFL's request to throw the whole verdict out. And one of the things that was covered pretty thoroughly as a result of some nudging from the NFL, because the only time I've heard from the NFL throughout the entirety of the proceedings, heard from them spontaneously, was something they thought I might want to know about. It was when the judge, and this happened on Tuesday morning, June 18, when the judge was making in open court without the jury present some pejorative comments about the quality of the plaintiff's case. Joe Flint from the Wall Street Journal was tweeting some things, and the league made sure that I was aware that there's some tweets from Mr. Flint that you might be interested in. And the AP, I think, eventually had an article about it. And it was a pretty gloomy day for the plaintiffs because the judge went off on their case. And you really got the impression the judge was teetering on this question of whether or not he should just throw the whole case out. And part of it was he was venting frustration because the plaintiffs had made it too complicated. Now, here's how that happens. And this is based on my 19 years of experience practicing law. What happens is, in a case like this, the defense, which is being paid by the hour and has every incentive to work the case, work the file, grind it, bill it. I've said this before. Every major law firm wants to find cost-insensitive clients. You want to have people with a lot of money and a big problem, and they're not going to micromanage your bill. They're not going to ask you, why did this take an hour? Why did this take 3 hours? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? They're just going to pay it when it comes in. And the NFL big problem with Sunday Ticket. They're going to pay these bills. And the defense has an incentive to work the case. And they over-lawyer the case. One of the reasons they over-lawyer the case is they never want the one approach they didn't follow to be the thing that in hindsight their colleagues say, well, that's kind of why you lost the case. Why didn't you argue this? Oh, did you argue that? Oh, you didn't. Oh, okay. So the defense over-lawyers the case. They throw everything they can at the wall in hopes of something sticking. What the plaintiffs need to do in that case is resist the temptation to respond. You don't have to take on every single argument. You don't have to overcomplicate the case. You can stay on the path of clarity and simplicity and let the defense spin their wheels in all these other forms of mud aimed at confusing the jury. The judge got upset with the plaintiffs because they were overcomplicating a simple case. It's a simple case. 32 teams coming together, working under the umbrella of the NFL, took the Sunday Ticket package and deliberately overpriced it so that people would choose to watch CBS and Fox instead, propping up and justifying the billions they were getting from CBS and Fox. So you get billions from DirecTV for Sunday Ticket, billions from CBS and Fox. The CBS and Fox contracts, you have an antitrust exemption. Since 1961, the NFL has been permitted to sell its games as a block to the over-the-air broadcast networks. But that doesn't apply to Sunday Ticket. So you do it with CBS and Fox, fine. You do it with Sunday Ticket, not fine. You ensure that it's a premium product, a complimentary product, and you've got tons of evidence that CBS and Fox hated Sunday Ticket because it undermined their ratings. So we price it high enough. Most people just watch the games that are available in their local markets, even if they'd rather watch out-of-market games. Antitrust violation, case over. The challenge to this case was coming up with what the damages are, the but-for world that they call it in antitrust law. If there hadn't been this violation of the antitrust laws, how much would Sunday Ticket have cost? How much could it have cost? How much should it have cost? And that's where the judge expressed some serious misgivings about the two expert witnesses that the plaintiffs called who created this but-for world. And when you look at the coverage of what the judge said, when you look at the transcript of what the judge said, it makes it more likely that now that it's on his desk, this request by the league to throw the whole thing out, more likely that he will. Gives the NFL a pretty good chance of turning 14.1 into 0. However, and this is the benefit of both writing a fairly large check for the transcript and reading every single page of it. This wasn't in the coverage that we saw from the AP or others who managed to generate articles about the day that the judge went a little bonkos and threatened to throw the whole case out. The plaintiffs managed to talk the judge off the ledge. There's an exchange there, and I'll be writing about this at PFT. After the judge vented his frustrations, his case is taking too long, too many of these witness testimonies are coming off like deposition transcripts where you're just fishing for anything. It's not tight, it's not clean, it's not simple, it's taking too long. This is a simple case. We all know what the case is about. Why is this taking so long? That was the judge's frustration. After he kind of let all that out, that's when one of the lawyers for the plaintiffs got him to understand what the case is about, got him to understand why it's been complicated, got him to understand what they're really arguing and why it's so challenging. When one side has committed an antitrust violation, in the reality that we know, why it's so hard to create an alternate universe where the antitrust violation had never happened. So when you look at everything that transpired that day, we only got one side of it in the coverage that was made available to us. The other side of it is the plaintiffs did a nice job of getting the judge under control. So as we go into the hearing on Wednesday, it's not quite the same minefield for the plaintiffs that it seemed to be based upon the coverage that we saw at the time. And you throw on top of it the $14.1 billion judgment coming from the $4.7 billion verdict. Because one of the things the judge said is, I don't know what these people are going to do. Well, they spoke loudly, and that can't be ignored. And judges ultimately respect the verdict issued by a jury. The NFL's latest submission calls it nonsensical. The judge isn't going to call it nonsensical. Judges don't like to take away jury verdicts. Judges don't like to disrespect the work of average citizens who came in and gave a month of their lives to trying to figure this out. And the judge saw the antitrust violation from the get-go. Again, some of the comments he made on the day that he vented his frustrations suggest that going into the case, he thought it was a winner for the plaintiffs. He just didn't like the way they went about presenting the case. But by the end of that day, by the end of that exchange, he was starting to come around to why the plaintiffs did what they did. So, huge week coming up. We won't get a ruling this week unless the judge would rule from the bench, which is very unusual. And it only happens in the clearest of cases. Chances are there will be a written ruling that comes out weeks after the fact. But what happens in court on Wednesday, the way the judge presents himself, the questions he asks, the things he says, that may give us a pretty strong clue as to which way he's going. Which is why I did give serious thought to flying out to LA and attending the hearing. It's just hard to balance because training camps are open. There's a lot going on. I want to be able to do PFT PM. I don't want to go to LA again until the Super Bowl is back there, and I have to. So I'd love to be there for it. And I'm trying to think of other ways to get it covered. Miles Simmons might get the short straw since he lives out there. He might just go there with his phone. And that's like, I want eyes and ears. I want him to observe. I want to get his impressions. And it's kind of good that he's not covering the case. He goes in fresh. Hey, what vibe did you get from the judge? What vibe did you get from the lawyers? Were you able to record the hearing? He might go. I don't think he wants to, but he might go. That's what the money is for, as he would say. One of the great quotes from one of the all-time great series. Underrated, I think, in the grand scheme of things. When you talk about the pantheon of great shows, Mad Men doesn't get the treatment that maybe it should. So, bottom line, we're continuing our review of the Sunday Ticket transcript. This is a big week for it. You want to read some of the entries we have at PFT about the Jerry Jones testimony, the Roger Goodell testimony, and also the little nugget of news that came from the testimony of Kathy Yancey, one of the VPs at the NFL who's responsible for working with the networks and ensuring compliance with the league standards this year. Coaches, mandatory availability during the game, one in the first half, one in the second half, mandatory. In the past, it's been optional, and it's been on the way to the locker room or back from the locker room at halftime. Now, on camera, mandatory. Really makes me wish Bill Belichick was still in the NFL, because I think he'd find a way. To comply without complying, even if it included borrowing a phrase from Marshawn Lynch and saying, I'm just here so I won't get fined. All right, let's see if we got some questions today before we wrap this thing up. Ty wants to know, well, and let's just characterize it this way. I'll just read what he said, because it's not a question per se. Let's just say the NFL loses all the appeals for Sunday Ticket. Here's the question. How much money should each anticipate to get per season paid to them? I understand there will be tons of fees included, but just a rough estimate, how much can I expect to get per season paid? I've tried to do the rough math on this. $14.1 billion is what the NFL is looking at. You've got prejudgment interest going back to 2015. Post-judgment interest from the day the verdict was entered, attorney's fees, which means every minute that was spent by the plaintiff's lawyers. And if they're smart, they kept track of everything they did. Because that, and in a fee shifting case, that's what we call it, where attorney's fees are available as a measure of damages, you need to keep track of all the time you spent doing everything, because then you put it together, just like it's a bill you would submit to the NFL, because that's what it is. Here's the bill for all the time we spent. So you had to pay your lawyers. Now you got to pay our lawyers on top of the $14.1 billion. That all gets put in a big pot. And what the plaintiff's lawyers will eventually propose is that they get a third of it. I'm assuming that's the fee agreement they had with the class representatives. And that's standard. And look, before you do the math and say, hey man, that's a lot of money for these lawyers, think about the risk they took. Think about the uncertainty. Think about all the time they spent chasing the dragon and slaying the dragon. You slay the dragon, you're entitled to the gold coins and other loot that the dragon has amassed over the years by pillaging towns all throughout the countryside. That's part of the deal. And class actions, said this before, but let me reiterate it. This is why companies hate them. If you're just one person and you go into a lawyer and say, I think the NFL has screwed me for the last 10 years. I think the NFL has created an antitrust violation by the way that it sells Sunday Ticket and that it overprices Sunday Ticket so that I wouldn't have bought it and that I would instead watch CBS and Fox and prop up their ratings. And the lawyer says, oh, you may have something here. How much were you charged? Well, I probably, I paid $400 a year and I shouldn't have had to pay anything. So 400 times 10, $4,000. Is it $4,000? Yeah, it's $4,000. Okay, so you want me to file a lawsuit, chase the dragon, slay the dragon, and if I do that, you get $4,000. No, thank you. Now, look, it's a fee-shifting case, so in theory, you could get paid for all your effort, but you still have to win. To entice someone to take this on, what you need to be able to do is take that relatively small indignity visited upon one person and multiply it by everyone who got screwed by this. 2.4 million. So that's why the class action becomes effective. That's why it's more than appropriate for the lawyers to get a third. So let's just say at the end of the day, and let's say it's 15 billion when it's time to cut it up. 5 billion goes to the lawyers. 10 billion is left over. And the commercial class is just one part of this. Let's say there's ultimately 10 billion for 2.4 million plaintiffs. What does that work out to be? 10 divided by 2.4. I got that all wrong. I gotta work a little more on the math. Math is very hard for me. I still think that the rough number, when the dust settles, my gut tells me if you got it every year, you're going to be somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. That's going to be your check from the NFL, which is far more than what we usually get in most class actions. So I still have to work on the math a little bit more, and there's a lot to be determined, but it's not going to be what so many of us, and part of the reason why we think that the check that you get at the end of the day for a class action is hardly anything. It's part of the PR campaign by the companies that hate class actions. Speaking of PR campaigns too, I didn't mention this earlier. One of the things I've noticed in reading the class action transcript, and it's so predictable, the pandering that the NFL has done to the jury throughout the case. It's all about the fans. It's all about the fans. This is about the fans. We only care about the fans. The fans, the fans, the fans, the fans, the fans. Everything is justified by saying this is for the fans. And, when you try to pander to someone at some point, they get offended because they think that you think they're stupid. And it's hard to come to a conclusion as to if that happened or when that happened. We know it did happen because of the verdict. But you need to kind of be in the room to sense how the jury's reacting to this. But it was the narrative that was created by the lawyers and grafted onto the witnesses. It's all about the fans. It's all about the fans. It's not about the money. It's all about the fans. To the point where Jerry Jones said, I don't know that I care that much about the money. It's all about the fans. It's all about the fans. It's all about the fans. Why? Because the jury is made up of fans. And they want to hide their antitrust violation behind this idea of all we're trying to do is make it better for the fans. Well, you know how you make it better for the fans? You make all of the games available. We're going to talk more about that on a different day. But the NFL spent a lot of time saying there's no way that would have worked. There's no way we could have had in-market games on CBS and Fox and out-of-market games on other networks. It never would have worked. It never would have worked. It would have been chaos. And as the plaintiffs have said in one of their briefs, chaos is one of the things that someone who violated the antitrust laws points to justify their violation of the antitrust laws. Well, it would have been chaos if we would have done it any other way. Well, maybe it wouldn't have been. And maybe it would have been more lucrative for the NFL. But the way it should have been, all those games, you think about it. The NFL is the only thing that attracts, other than the Olympics. The Olympics are doing pretty well so far. But year in and year out, the NFL is the only thing that attracts a massive audience live to watch that game as it's happening. And if you put every game that happens at 1 o'clock Eastern on a Sunday on TV, regular TV that everyone has access to, either through cable, satellite, or a streaming service, CBS, Fox, ABC, NBC, ESPN, ESPN2, FS1, USA, TNT, TBS. You got 10 different channels. CBS and Fox have the in-market games. All the other ones have the out-of-market games. I think the NFL makes more money. And if you're truly focused on what's good for fans, having all the games on your TV that you can flip from one channel to the next and see any of them with no additional cost, that's what's good for the fans. And I mention that and I harp on that because that might be the end result. Apart from any money you get, whether you paid for Sunday ticket or you didn't, the end result could be all these games are going to be on your TV service that you're already paying for. And all those channels that you wouldn't be watching on a Sunday because you're watching CBS and Fox and the in-market games, you can just turn the dial. Not that there's a dial anymore. There's nothing to turn. You can just click the button and you can pick the cable channel that has the out-of-market game that you'd rather watch at no extra charge to you. That's how it should be. That would be the absence of an antitrust violation. And maybe that's what we're going to get. Okay. This comes from Calvin. I'm sure the Jets will be hesitant to trade for a disgruntled player in the future, but does the Hassan Reddick situation make teams hesitant to deal with his agent in the future? No. This isn't about the agent. This is about the Jets trading for a guy that wanted a new contract without getting him a new contract on the way through the door. And I know that they've put out to media that will just take their version and run with it and not question it, the idea that, well, we kind of had an understanding or this. No, look. You find a guy on another team that wants a new contract and you trade for him. You better be damn sure when you trade for him, you get the deal done. Reddick's holding out because they didn't get the deal done. It's their own damn fault. And other teams aren't going to look at that and say, well, the agent's been a jerk. They're going to look at it and say, Jets being the Jets. And it goes all the way up to ownership. The dysfunction of a team is set in motion by ownership. And it manifests itself in a bunch of different ways. And one way the dysfunction of the Jets has manifested itself this year, they traded for a guy who wanted a new contract without signing him to a new contract. They never should have done it. That's where the owner needs to step in and say, no, we're not doing this. The guy wants a new contract. We're going to trade for him. He's still going to want a new contract. Unless we're going to give it to him, he might not show up. Then what are we going to do? Either he takes the offer that we make on a new contract or we don't trade for him. We find somebody else to come in and play the position of edge rusher. Jay Quintana, what's a successful season for the Chargers? Well, it's winning the Super Bowl, of course. Isn't that what every team says? We want to win the Super Bowl? Look, a successful season for the Chargers is making the playoffs and winning a playoff game. That's a great start for Jim Harbaugh. I think they're going to give the Chiefs hell. And Chiefs fans get so upset. Just like, oh, we've won the last 2 Super Bowls. You know that means we're going to win this one and the next one and the next one, and no one's ever going to challenge us again. We're going to rule the league for as long as Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback. I mean, let's be realistic. The Chargers, during their semi-dysfunctional years, have been competitive with the Chiefs. Back to 2018, Chargers were in position to be the 1 seed. They blew it on a Saturday night against the Ravens. The Chiefs came in, took the division, took the 1 seed. Would have been the Chargers. Remember the Chargers had that great win on a Thursday night in Kansas City to put them in the driver's seat? Jim Harbaugh's not going to have to do much. And Jim Harbaugh's got that knack of just getting guys ready to go out and play and give their all. I think the Chargers are going to be a problem this year. I think he's going to get the most out of Justin Herbert. He's going to get the most out of the rest of the roster. He's going to find a way to fix some of the dysfunction that has manifested itself over the years, and the Chargers are going to be better. So I think a success for them, make it to the playoffs and win a game. But I think they might even do more than that. We'll do our predictions once we get closer to the start of the season. I like to delay it as long as possible, but I'm probably going to call for the Chargers. Not that anybody cares. That's the thing about doing these predictions. I mean, if you're wrong, they'll make fun of you. If you're right, you got lucky. But I don't think it's going out on a thin, creaky limb to say the Chargers will make it to the playoffs this year, because I kind of think that the presence of Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert, that alone tells me pretty good chance they're going to make it to the postseason. Hello from London, says Dan Mushman. Do you think the pending damages for the Sunday ticket trial may have an effect on any future franchise sale? The per team potential liability would be a significant percentage of the value of a franchise. May it already have delayed a franchise being put up for sale? I think what it might do, it might cause some owners to be far more inclined to take advantage of the coming ability to sell a piece of the team to a private equity fund. What better way to raise $440 million than to give up a piece of the team in exchange for the money that you would take and use to pay off the Sunday ticket judgment, to pay off your portion of it, which is going to be $440 million if 14.1 stands. So look, it becomes something that you need to take into account if you're going to buy a team. I wonder how much Josh Harris took it into account when he bought the Commanders. I wonder how much the Walton Penner Group took it into account when they bought the Broncos. I wonder how seriously the NFL took the Sunday ticket litigation. That's part of the due diligence process. When you are buying a company, you go in and you study anything and everything that could be a current or future liability. And certain decisions are made and certain measures are taken. Money can be put in escrow pending the outcome of this, that, or the other thing. I wonder how seriously anyone took this Sunday ticket case, because at the end of the day, Harris and the Walton Penner Group are on the hook for these past antitrust violations. And yes, future owners are going to be on the hook as well, and it will be a factor. But one way that teams can get their $440 million, sell a chunk of the team to private equity. And one of my immediate reactions to the verdict was, this could drive the values down. If you've got a bunch of teams looking to sell a piece to a private equity fund, if you're the private equity fund, it's a buyer's market all of a sudden. So you dictate the terms and you say what you're going to pay, because you're in a position where the teams are competing with each other to get you to be the one to come in and give them the lifeline and give them the $440 million they need to pay off this judgment if and when it comes to it. There's still so much. And look, the NFL will exhaust every avenue for appeal. The plaintiffs will exhaust it. If they end up on the losing side at some point, if this pendulum swings the other way, there's too much at issue here. This is going to be part of our NFL experience, our shared NFL, good, bad, or otherwise, for the next 3 or 4 years. And that gives the teams time to figure out what the hell they're going to do if and when the reckoning arrives. Jordan Davey, teams don't want to go 5 years fully guaranteed for quarterbacks because of Deshaun Watson, but with recent 4-year extensions for Tua and Love, could this set up Dak Prescott to get at least 4 years fully guaranteed if he hits the open market with the leverage he has? Currently, there's a grievance pending against the league as it relates to the reluctance to give fully guaranteed contracts to certain players, specifically quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson, one of the examples. That trial has already started. It's going to pick up later in the summer. I mention it because you can talk about leverage, but then you look at what happens if a team gives a player too much. What happened to the Browns? The Haslam's got the cold shoulder. The Haslam's got frowned upon by the other members of Club Oligarch. You don't want to be the one that the other owners are upset with. You don't want to be the pariah in your private club. It's collusion. It's improper, but it happens. So we saw Kirk Cousins get to the market this year. We saw him get $100 million fully guaranteed, 2 years fully guaranteed, plus another $10 million that bleeds into year 3. Now, we've seen with Love and Tua, 3 years that are guaranteed as a practical matter, plus some money that bleeds into year 4. Could Dak get 4 years fully guaranteed? The risk is, if you guess wrong, you're paying a lot of money to a guy that isn't helping you win. And it makes it harder to pay the guys on the team who are helping you win. Think of how good the Browns could be right now if they'd kept the money and the draft picks. That's the one part of the Deshaun Watson situation that gets overlooked. Forget about the 5-year fully guaranteed contract. Look at everything they gave up. 3 first-round picks, 3 mid-round picks, 6 players that you could get for very low cost that would be a key part of the nucleus now and moving into the future. Even if you only hit on half of them, it's 3 great players that you would be paying not much to. So, separate and apart from whether or not anyone is going to give a 5-year fully guaranteed contract to a quarterback is the question of whether the Browns picked the wrong guy to give it to. That's the real issue. It blew up in their faces. It's going to cause those who look down upon the Hasms to snicker at their misfortune. That's what you get. That's karma. That's collusion karma. How dare you not collude? Look what happened to you when you refused to collude. You spent your money fully guaranteed on the wrong guy. And this is the year, really. I think this is it. Year 3. It's going to break one way or the other. Watson is either going to justify it or it's going to be obvious. With 2 years left, the Browns got to figure out what the hell they're going to do. They owe him $92 million after this year, fully guaranteed. What are they going to do? They're going to bite the bullet and move on? Or are they going to keep trying to will this guy into becoming the guy that he was 2020 and prior to that? Rama Aravind, why don't teams move all the cap dollars 10 or 20 years down the road? A super rich owner could build a dream team for 1 or 2 years to win a Super Bowl. There's only so far you can kick the can under the salary cap. There's only so many years you can spread out guaranteed payments that are made now. And we see it mainly with quarterbacks. There's that big bill to be paid by way of cap dollars once the quarterback is gone because, and you look at Josh Allen as a great example of it. Once they signed him to a new deal, his cap numbers the first 3 years were relatively low, less than $20 million each year. And now they start going up. And there's that big number on the back end that's only going to get bigger and bigger if they keep him around. That's what they do. But look, if teams really wanted to go all in, they could. And this goes back to the Cowboys, but I think other teams are the same way. There isn't a clear connection between spending and on-field success. And this is one of the things that's kind of bubbled up through the Sunday ticket trial. Revenue sharing and salary cap, the correlation might not be as strong as people think it is between that and competitive balance. I mean, look at how good the Patriots have been. Look at how bad the bad teams have been. Even with all the advantages for bad teams, it's almost impossible to really turn it around. The Bengals are in the process of doing it with Joe Burrow. But I think at the end of the day, and I hate to say this because it makes people jaded about the sport, and we want people to love football, and I love football, but I also accept what it ultimately is. It's a business. It's a for-profit enterprise. And for Jerry Jones to get on the witness stand at the Sunday ticket trial and say he's never taken a profit from the Cowboys, which I guess is supportable if you dig into the financial statements. He's paid himself about $250,000 a year, and he's never taken a profit out of the Cowboys. Most would find that hard to believe. But secondly, when he says, I don't know that I care that much about money, I think for most of us, we look at that and say, come on. This is fundamentally a business that is trying to make as much money as possible. Look at how much money is coming in. That's not accidental. That's engineered. That's deliberate. They don't want us to think of it that way. This goes back to the framing of the theme that was presented at the Sunday ticket trial. It's about the fans, not the money. But we all know it's about the money. And we can compartmentalize that. I think we can. We can enjoy the sport for what it is, and we can acknowledge that the owners are all horribly greedy and it's all about money, and anything they say to the contrary is a friggin' lie. I think we can do that. We can spin those two plates. We can support our favorite team. We can enjoy watching the games, but we can also recognize that it is a greed-driven enterprise, and they are greedy, and that the greed blinds them to things like the antitrust violation that was staring them right in the face, that they've ignored. And now that they're going to have to pay the money, what are they going to do? They're going to look for others to foist it upon, even though it's their own fault. Blinded by their own greed, trying to get more and more and more, trying to get to $25 billion in revenue by 2027. That's what happens along the way. All right. Well, we've been going for an hour. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. There's some other questions on here, but if I didn't get to your question, if you really feel strongly about it, ask it tomorrow. That's it for Monday's edition of PFT PM. Again, during the Olympics, we're going to tape in the AM. We're We're going to have it available in the PM. We're going to try to keep up with everything that's happening, but camps are open. Preseason is coming. Hall of Fame game this week. There's a lot of stuff to cover. We're doing our best to get it all. And we thank you for choosing PFT, PFT PM, and all other platforms to get your NFL news, analysis, and other information. We'll see you back here again on Tuesday. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.